In today's video, we'll be diving deep into how black people got to America through the brutal transatlantic slave trade, where they were kidnapped from their homes in Africa and forced onto ships to be enslaved in the Americas from the 16th to the 19th century. About 12.5 million Africans were put on ships, with roughly 10.7 million surviving the horrific journey to be sold as enslaved labor, primarily on plantations. And we'll be exploring the possibility of black Africans traveling the land of America even before Columbus founded America in 1492. Stay tuned because trust me, you do not want to miss this one. We have always been told the story Columbus discovered America in 1492. But here's the plot twist. There's evidence suggesting Africans may have set foot in the Americas before him. In the early 1300s, a powerful West African emperor, Mansa Abu Bakr II of Mali, reportedly gave up his throne because he wanted to explore the Atlantic. According to accounts, he set out a massive fleet of ships, and some historians believe they may have reached the Americas. Now, the evidence is debated, but there are intriguing signs. First, similarities between African and Native American art patterns. Second, traces of African words in early American languages. And third, crops like cotton and yams native to Africa showing up in the Americas before Europeans brought them. So while we can't say with 100% certainty the possibility is strong, Africans may have crossed the oceans century before Columbus. Fast forward to 1500s, when Spanish and Portuguese explorers began pushing into the New World. Africans were right there with them. One famous figure was Estevanico, or Esteban de Durantes, a man from Morocco. He arrived in Florida in 1527 with Spanish explorers. Imagine this, out of hundreds of men who started the journey, only a handful survived, and Estevanico was one of them. He traveled across what we now call Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico, becoming one of the very first non-native explorers of North America. Africans also matched with conquistadors like Hernán Cortés in Mexico and Francisco Coronado in American Southwest. Some came as soldiers, some as guides, and some as servants, but they were here centuries before the English colonies even began. At this point, Africans in America were still a small number, but everything changed with the rise of one of history's darkest chapters. Starting in the 1500s, European powers realized that the New World had enormous wealth: sugar, tobacco, cotton, rice. But to grow these crops, they needed massive labor. Their solution? Slavery, which then gave way to the transatlantic slave trade. Over 12 million Africans were captured and shipped across the Atlantic. About 10.7 million survived the Middle Passage, a brutal voyage marked by hunger, disease, chains, and death. People were taken mostly from the West and Central Africa, from places like modern-day Nigeria, Ghana, Angola, and Congo. By the early 1600s, enslaved Africans began arriving in English America. The first recorded group came in 1619, when a ship called the White Lion brought about 20 Africans to Jamestown, Virginia. From there, the numbers grew. Within 200 years, millions of Africans and their descendants were living in the Americas. The majority were enslaved. Enslaved Africans didn't just work, they built America. They harvested cotton that fueled the Industrial Revolution. They grew tobacco that enriched colonies. They cooked, built, and passed down music, dance, and spiritual practices that still shape culture today. And let's not forget resistance. Enslaved people escaped, revolted, and fought for freedom. From the Maroons in Jamaica to the Underground Railroads in the US, they proved time and time again that they were not just victims of history, but fighters and survivors. Slavery in the US ended in 1865, but freedom was not the end of the struggle. Segregation, Jim Crow laws and racism followed. Yet, through it all, African Americans shaped the soul of America. From jazz and blues to hip-hop, from inventors like Garrett Morgan to leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., from fields of cotton to the highest offices of power, including the presidency. So, what's the real story? Black people were not strangers to America. They may have been here even before Columbus. They marched with the earliest explorers, and they came in the millions through one of the most painful migrations in human history. But no matter how they arrived, one truth stands. Black people are not just part of America's story, they are America's story.